Hi guys, today I'm here with a guy that I met a few years ago through some friends of ours and colleagues of ours. He's a UK-based coach named Ankush Jain, and he's been teaching at some of the same places that I have, and we've met several times socially. And one of the things that I find so fascinating is his grasp of basically the human experience and what it is that actually creates the experience we have and creates the emotions we go through and how to deal with all that stuff. So I'm very happy that he could be with us here today. So Ankush, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me on the interview, TJ. It's a pleasure.
It should be fun. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story? How did you end up where you're at right now?
Okay, I'll try and make a longer story a little bit more concise and digestible. So I'm 33. And when I was 19, I had my first foray into the self-development world for various reasons. And, you know, I started learning a lot of things about body language and eye contact and building rapport with people. And over the years, I kind of explored so many different things from Alexander technique to voice training. I went to a speech coach for a year. You name it, I did it, and you know, we met along that path as well as I was a kind of perpetual student for a decade, and things were great, and I learned a lot in that process, and I had been asked several times by different people, oh, you should coach, you should help other people, you get this, and I'd always held back. I had always thought, no, that's not for me. I'm just learning this for myself. I don't want to teach other people. And in reality, I was scared. I was scared to what people would think, and who am I to teach other people? What have I got to talk about? And a few years ago, when I turned 30, I kind of did one of those soul-searching things of, okay, I'm 30 now. You know, what do I really want to do with my life? And eventually, it occurred to me. It wasn't the first thing that occurred to me, but eventually it occurred to me that I should be coaching. It's something that I was really passionate about. I love helping other people. And that kind of, I thought I had done all of my self-development and everything, and now I just needed to learn the how-to of coaching. And that was 2.5 years ago. But really, I kind of start that as my first real understanding then, or exploration about the human experience, as you said, and how the human experience is created. And it started off a journey over the last 2.5 years of really, really just challenging every single thing that I thought was true, and realizing that life works completely different to what I thought it did, and yet not really ruining anything, if you like, of everything that I'd learned the 10 years before. Everything I'd learned before was really helpful, and this just kind of expanded, you know, my view of how life actually worked. And so it's been an incredible journey. I feel like I'm just getting started, and now I'm very lucky that I get to do this for a living and share what I know with other people around the world.
That's very cool. And last time I saw you in person was in January when we were both teaching at a mutual friend of ours workshop in Vegas,
Yeah.
which was, you know, a lot of fun. And I mean, just the other day, and it's been a few months now, I saw one of the attendees at that workshop post on Facebook how much he appreciated what you taught him at this workshop. And this was a guy that I actually spent some time with at the workshop, and we were talking for a bit. And what you seem to have helped him with was one of the main things that he told me about in the beginning when I first met him before the workshop even started, was one of his major challenges. And the way I read his post was that you'd basically given him a new insight that helped him, you know, deal with being upset, if I can use that word. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this whole thing, like just basically those negative emotions. What are they? Where do they come from? And you know, how do you deal with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that myself, and it was really nice to kind of read the profound impact it had on him. But it's not unusual, and the reason that it's not unusual is when people have a kind of deeper understanding of how life actually works. a lot of things fall away. So the difference between what I saw before, which was models and things to remember and more information, is it's about implementing something. It's an implication-based learning process.
Could you touch on the difference between an implication-based and an application-based learning?
Yeah, so application-based learning, I said it the wrong way around before, is you take some new information, in effect, you learn it, where it's a technique or a new model or a strategy, and then you apply that technique, strategy, or model into your world, and that gives you your learning. You improve. That's the theory. Implication-based learning, which I teach, is someone giving you greater understanding for the human experience. You see something that you didn't see before. It's not a new model. It's not a new concept. It's actually what was in front of you that you were just completely missing. And once you see that, all of a sudden, there are numerous implications of that. So there's nothing to remember, but it's like, oh, that's how life works? Now a lot of things that I used to do no longer make sense. And so it's a much more natural way that when you have an insight, you see the implications of it. And so this is what I was talking about. This is what I was sharing in Vegas, and particularly around emotions and negative emotions. This is one of my early insights that I had when I first started, looking in this direction. And I wouldn't have said I was an angry person. And you probably knew me, I think, a few months into my journey, and I came across relatively calm. But I realize now that, like a lot of people, I'm sure, like a lot of people watching, we have moments when we get frustrated. We have moments when we get really upset. We get moments when we get really angry. And for me, at least, a few years ago, it looked like I had no choice in that. It looked like a circumstance would happen, a situation would occur, someone would say something, someone would do something, and then my reaction to that was anger. And that was just a fixed thing. Now, I probably could have conceded to you that, okay, everyone reacts differently, but I still would have thought that was hardwired. And I would have thought I had no choice in that. And I also would have thought that the anger was telling me about the person's behavior, about the situation, about the circumstance. And that was just my worldview. That's how life looked like to me. And one of my very early insights was that was a complete misunderstanding. That life didn't work that way. Our human experience isn't created that way, regardless of how that looks. And so let's explore this together for a little bit. If we take, and I like talking about going to the gym because so many people can relate to that. Now, imagine that you're lying in bed. It's the morning. You know you should go to the gym, or maybe it's the end of the workday, and it's time to go to the gym, and you just feel like, not today. Today I could just go to the pub and have a pint. Today I could just not go and just veg out on my couch and watch TV. And you've got that feeling of like, I don't want to. And I'm sure there've been times when we've not gone to the gym because we've thought that the feeling is telling us that going to the gym would be really bad. But there've been times, I know for me, when in that same scenario, I've then gone, no, I'm going to go to the gym. I know it looks uncomfortable. I know it looks like it's not going to be fun. And every time I would go to the gym, I'd have a great time. And so when we really explore this, there are so many times when we'll have a negative emotion about something, or we'll have something that looks uncomfortable, we'll have an uncomfortable feeling. And yet when we ignore it, it's proven to us that that feeling wasn't a good predictor of the circumstance. And so this is very true of anger, that it looks like to us when we're angry that we're right. And again, I love using the example of an angry shopper, maybe just because I used to work in retail, and again, people can relate to this, that if you imagine a guy or a girl in a retail store, and imagine they're trying to return something, and we've probably all seen this at some point in our life, and the person is trying to return something, and it's not going well, and they're talking to the shop assistant, and they're getting angrier and angrier. And as they're getting angrier and angrier, their IQ, I would say, is dropping. They would say things and do things they would never have done when they were, clear-headed. And we see that in road rage as well, when people just lose it and then they say, well, I wasn't thinking, I don't know what came over me. And so we can see when we think about other people that as they get angrier, they lose their bearings, they lose their sense of perspective, they don't make good decisions, they don't take appropriate actions or appropriate behaviors for that situation. They're not in a good space. And we see this in other people. But what we also see in ourselves, if we really think about it, is when we get angrier and angrier, we get more and more adamant that we're right and that we're justified. And we, bang the table and all the rest of it. And it looks like our behavior is justified when we're in that angry feeling, when we're upset, when we're pissed off. And yet we can see when we explore other people, that doesn't make sense. And so one of my early insights was, when I'm getting angry, I'm not getting angry because I'm right. I'm not getting angry because of the situation or the circumstance. And in fact, what the anger is telling me is not that this is a bad situation, this is a situation to be upset about. What the anger is telling me is, I'm not thinking clearly right now. I'm not in a clear state of mind. I haven't got perspective on the situation. And that one insight was absolutely key for me. I mean, it changed so much in my life. And this is what I talk about implication-based learning, because if that is true, and some people might be listening to this thinking, well, I don't buy it, that's okay. And what I just say to them is, imagine if it was true. Because this is what I did. I heard someone teach this. I think another person you interviewed, it was Garrett Kramer. And so I heard Garrett say this. And part of me was going, no, I don't buy that. That's not true. And I was thinking of lots of reasons why it wasn't true, and trying to think of exceptions to it. And at some point I thought, what if it is? Let me just go with it. What's the harm? What's the harm for a few hours to just suspend what I think I know and give myself an opportunity to potentially learn something new? And if it's not new, if it doesn't work, if it's wrong, then I'll be right. And
so you kind of tested out a new reality for a little bit.
Absolutely. And so, and for me, I was in a training room. I couldn't go anywhere, so it was a bit easier for me. And what I found was that if it was true, a load of my behavior changed. So if it was true that when I was angry or frustrated or upset, that all that meant, the only thing it meant, was that I wasn't thinking clearly, that I wasn't seeing the situation with perspective, and I wasn't right, chances are I was probably off the mark, then wow, my behavior would change. My behavior would change with my family, when I had arguments with my family. It would change at work, when I'd get an email coming in that looked like it was the end of the world. It would change how I would react in relationships. It would change how I'd act with friendships or just people. So when I felt disrespected, that wasn't telling me that I was being disrespected. There were so many examples of this. And I was talking about this just a few hours ago with someone in a corporate setting. And the person asked me, so does this mean you ignore your emotions? Does this mean you change your thinking or you ignore your emotions? And I said, no. What I'm saying is that your emotions are really, really helpful. Your feelings are incredibly useful, but they're telling you something very different to what you probably think they're telling you. And again, one of the examples I used with him was about holidays. I know in the past I've been off on holiday in a few days' time, and I've gone, yeah, the holiday's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'll go on holiday, and it's been rubbish. I've not enjoyed it. And actually, more often when it's the other way around, where I've been thinking about a situation which I'm dreading, whether it's an interview, whether it's giving a presentation at work, whether it's going on a date or something else, and it looks like, oh no, I'm dreading it, I feel anxious, and it's gone fine. And so feelings are a really, really bad predictor of the future. And we can all, again, just examine this in our own lives of how many times our feelings have been wrong as a predictor for the future. That's not what they're there for. But it doesn't mean you just ignore your feelings. It's about what are they telling you.
So, I'd love for you to elaborate on that. Like, what are they there for? What's the purpose of your feelings?
So I would say they are just reflection of thought. That's all they are. And that's incredibly useful because I know for me in the past, I would try and control my thinking. I'd be someone who had to manage my thoughts, manage my thinking. I had kind of had this whole, I guess, mental system, where I would be trying to manage the whole thing. And it's like a guy trying to manage all these spinning plates. And it's incredibly difficult to do. And it takes up so much mental resource. And I used to get feedback from people going, you're incredibly analytical. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I was, because I was trying to manage my thinking all the time. I was trying to manage what was going on in my head. And so what I realized when I came across this understanding is, wow, I don't need to do that. Now, I'm sure your listeners will have had hundreds, if not thousands of thoughts since the start of this interview, just as I have, just as you have. And the great thing is we don't need to tick them off or monitor each one of those because we just get loads of random thoughts that we dismiss all the time. And I'm sure one day I'll get an answer that shocks me, but often when I talk to one-on-one clients and I'm first explaining this, I'll say, you've dismissed thoughts all the time. And I guarantee that every single person listening to this or watching this has had a murderous thought at least once in their life. There's certainly been at least one time in their life where they're, oh, God, I could just kill that person. And I'm sure one day I'll be shocked and someone will say they actually have done it. But so far, whenever I've asked that question, so everyone's gone, yeah, I've dismissed it. I didn't actually go and kill someone, which is a very sensible thing. And we know this. We know this. So the feeling is just a reflection of thought because they're there to give us some guidance around our thinking to what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. And so when we get that really strong feeling and it looks like it's telling us about something else, it's not. It's just telling us about our thinking. So I'm guessing everyone that has been watching this and has been thinking about a murderous thought that they've had, I'm pretty sure that everyone who's had that wasn't in a really calm place when they had that murderous thought, because they probably would have acted on it. They were probably really hot up and angry, and there was some common sense inside them that went, I'm probably not thinking straight. And they might not verbalize it like this, but I'm not thinking straight. I'm not going to go and kill that person. That's really stupid. Because we can tell, we have all of the symptoms of like not being in a clear state of mind. And so our feelings are there to give us that feedback. So they're incredibly useful. And yet so many of us think they're a problem. Oh no, I'm angry, it's a problem. I'm anxious, it's a problem. I'm upset, it's a problem. Or a lack of feelings, I'm not happy, that's a problem. It's not a problem.
So, to a lot of people that I've talked to about these things, and when I've heard you and others speak about this, a lot of the objections seem to be that, well, if it's not a problem, why is my experience that it is a problem? If I'm scared to do something, obviously there's a problem because I might not do it because I'm scared. So when you say it's not a problem, what do you mean by that?
So when I say it's not a problem because that doesn't stop us from doing stuff. I mean, already in our lives, it doesn't stop us. Thinking we don't want to go to the gym, okay, it stops us sometimes perhaps, but it doesn't stop us from going to the gym. But it's not a problem if you realize, it's a problem if you don't know what it's telling you, but it's not a problem if you realize it's just telling you about thought in the moment. So if, let's say you're feeling anxious, that's just telling you right now, whatever you're thinking about, and it could be even consciously or unconsciously, that you've got anxious thinking and there's nothing to do about it. And what I find is that when most people have objections about it, I say, have you ever had that anxious feeling and then not done anything about it? And they'll kind of sheepishly go, well, no, well, of course I'm going to try and fix it. I'm trying to calm myself down. And this is the thing, I've never met anyone who then doesn't do anything about it. And that can seem scary. And again, I just encourage them to test that out of tr why not do anything? So I spoke about this. You mentioned us being in Vegas together in January, and I spoke about this in Vegas where the whole day before my talk, I was feeling very anxious, but I did nothing about it. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't talk about it because that wasn't a problem. It was just that I was having thoughts about, well, what am I going to say? What are people going to think? Very common thoughts that so many people have. Yet I knew because I know this stuff that I'm talking about, that there was nothing to do. It wasn't an issue. It wasn't a problem. But if I saw it as a problem, I would then try and fix it. And in trying and fixing it, I probably wouldn't make it any better. I'd probably make it worse.
So I get this conversation that I end up in a lot that's related to this, and it's, people tell me I work a lot with people who want to do things that they're scared of doing, whether it's public speaking or communication with someone or whatever it is. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because one of the things that I talk to them about is all those things that they're already doing that scares them, but they've kind of put that fright or that activity into the good scared box. They'll watch horror movies, or they'll do roller coasters, or whatever it is that gives them that kick and that
Yeah.
experience of fright. But since they have thoughts telling them that it's safe, then they can enjoy being scared and still go do that activity. And I try to help them see how that relates to the things that they're scared of and that they're not doing. What would be your take on that?
Yeah, I mean the way I see it is you're not going to get this understanding and suddenly not be scared of anything. So that's a common misunderstanding that people think, oh, okay, it either it doesn't work because I'm still scared of stuff, or I don't get it yet because I'm still scared of stuff, or I'm still anxious, or I'm still sad or nervous or whatever. And that's not on offer. So what I don't tell people is you're never going to feel bad, you're never going to feel anxious, you're never going to feel upset. But um, what I say is that having a better understanding of this is you stop getting analytical about it, you stop trying to fix it, and you let your mental clarity, emerge much, much, much quicker. Now, with certain things, and it's true for me, they still look scary. And you can have the best understanding intellectually, but it still looks scary. So for me, what I talk about with my clients is the only way to, or not the only way, a really good way to overcome that is just go and do the thing you're scared of. And again, this is a practical thing. If you're scared of spiders, going in and trying to pick up a huge tarantula probably isn't, the best thing. Some people are scared of spiders are probably like recalling back from just the thought of that. Uh, but going and maybe going for a small one, or maybe looking it through a screen or something, slowly, slowly, you'll break through that illusion because it won't be that bad. It's never that bad. Our fears are not telling us that we're thinking straight. They're telling us that we're not seeing the situation clearly. And so if that's true, then the fear is not based on reality, but to prove that to yourself, often it's really good to just slowly, what people call, push your comfort zone. And what I say to people is don't go and do that so much that you just stop. It petrifies you, because that's what people do. They try and go too far. But actually, just doing it, at your own pace, and that's different to everyone else, different for different people. So, people could have a fright of talking in public. Now, if you go and sign up for a speaking gig in front of 1,000 people, might go badly, and you might make the situation worse. But what it might make sense to do is, well, go and speak in front of one person, and then two, and then maybe five, and then maybe 10. And at the same time, deepen your understanding of what we're talking about, because having an understanding of what we're talking about helps people to not take that fear seriously. And so I'm very practical. I take two approaches. One is the understanding of this, that the fear isn't telling you that you shouldn't do it, which is the intellectual side and the theory, if you like. And then in practical terms, I was encouraged to take steps, because then you're proving it to yourself that, oh yeah, it's not that bad. Oh yeah, it's not that bad. And you're building that up. And, I don't know anyone that's good at public speaking who hasn't, continually developed their skills and got better at it. That's always going to be the case. But what this understanding does is helps people take the necessary steps they need to do to get good at public speaking or driving a car or anything else.
So you're talking about a combination of intellectually understanding this concept as well as getting real world experience in not only the thing that you're trying to improve, but also getting real world experience and using this understanding out in public, or not even using it, but seeing it in effect.
Yeah, because some people get caught up in just trying to understand this, and I wouldn't even say trying to understand it intellectually, trying to get an insight about it. If you're scared of doing something, some people might go, well, I'll just sit here until I realize it's just thought, and then I feel better about it. And in reality, that means that people don't end up doing anything at all. And what I'm a really big believer in is going and taking some action. So there are a load of things. So in my experience, how has this shown up in my life is there've been a load of things in the last 2.5 years in my own journey that I've been scared to do. And having this understanding hasn't removed the fear, but it's helped me have courage. So courage is doing something even though it looks scary. Now, because I know that, okay, this thing looks scary right now, but that fear isn't telling me it's going to be a dangerous situation, that fear isn't telling me I shouldn't do it, it enables me to be courageous, it enables me to go and do that thing despite the fear. And that's very different from being fearless. Fearless is having no fear. And I've not found that I've become fearless, but even though it looks like it to some people, it's just meant that I've been able to become more courageous. I've been able to have the courage to go and do things which look scary, because I know the fear is an illusion, even though it still feels like that.
Right. So it's not that you don't feel fear; it's just that you know that you can handle it, and what to do about it when you do feel it.
Absolutely, and I'm sure until the rest of my days, it's going to be the same thing. I'll feel scared about stuff, and I'll just go and do it.
Perfect. And what about other emotions? Like fear is a strong emotion, but it's often an emotion that passivizes people. Like it just makes people reserved. It makes them pull back. How about the more aggressive emotions, like anger?
Yeah, and we talked about anger a little bit earlier on, and for me, it's the same thing. I was coaching someone, a few years ago about this understanding, and on our second conversation, he said, "Well, I had an experience. I want to share it with you." I said, "Yeah, sure. Let's talk about it." And this chap was telling me that he went home and his daughter came back from school, and she hadn't eaten her lunch, and so she'd brought her lunchbox back and hadn't eaten her lunch. And this guy had a little bit of a temper, and he got angry at her, and he kind of had a go at, "Why aren't you eating your lunch?" And your mum's put it together for you, and all of this stuff. And his daughter, teenage daughter, kind of ran upstairs, upset, and went to her bedroom. And when she went up, he kind of suddenly realized, what we'd been talking about, and went, "Oh man, that wasn't the best way to react." He could see when he'd had that little bit of the anger had started to subside, that the thought came to him, "Oh wow, I just reacted. I didn't act from a sense of mental clarity. I reacted from my anger." And so when he realized that, all of a sudden the anger dissipated. He went, "Oh, I'm an idiot." And so he went upstairs, knocked on his daughter's bedroom door, and then spoke to her and said, "Look, I'm sorry for shouting, but the reason I did is because I love you and I care for you. And your mom and I just want you to be happy and healthy. And if you don't eat your lunch, my concern is that you won't be healthy and it's going to affect the rest of your life." Or words to that effect. and it's probably what he was trying to say when he got angry. It's far more effective. And his daughter then cries even more, gives him a big hug and says, "I love you, Dad." Now, he then came into our session, told me the story and said, "Well, how do I stop getting angry?" And I kind of laughed and I said, "Well, that's not on the table, right? You're going to get angry." What I find is, as people explore this, they tend to get angrier less, but you still get angry. And I said, if nothing changes in your life, except that every time you get angry, at some point you realize that it wasn't the best way to act. I know you don't want to be angry. I know you don't want to do, the inappropriate action at first, or the less effective action at first. But even seeing it after the fact will change all of your relationships. It will change all of your interactions with people, for the rest of his life. Because in the past, I'm sure he would have shouted at his daughter, felt justified. Daughter went upstairs, his wife would have come home, he would have told his wife, they would have stewed about it for a day or two, and then had added layer of misunderstanding upon misunderstanding, such as she never listened, why do we bother, etc., etc., etc. And all of that's just got cut out, and he saved himself hours and hours of, headache, as well as being able to effectively communicate what he was trying to communicate.
That's both a great story and a great example. You said something that was interesting. You said that your experience is that the more people deepen their understanding, the less they'll get angry. They won't stop getting angry, but they might get angry less often. Or I'm sure the same goes for scared or upset or whatever it is. Why is that?
I really don't know. It's just something that I've noticed. But for example, for myself, I know I was a much angrier person before. I know I used to get frustrated more before, and so many other things. And I find myself now a much calmer, much happier, more grounded, more present person, both in myself and the feedback I get from other people. And yet, having said that, I still get angry, I still get frustrated, I still have times when I lose my temper. I tend to stay in it for less long. It doesn't tend to kind of grab hold of me like it used to. But um, but yeah, I don't know why, TJ. I think it might be because at some subconscious level, it stops making sense for me to lose my temper. At some unconscious level, it just doesn't make sense anymore. But like I said, we don't have control over our thoughts. And sometimes those thoughts just come up, and that's okay. And I'm far more comfortable with that now.
That's perfect. And you said, on a subconscious level, and I think maybe that might be interesting to explore a little bit because you've been talking about, your thoughts and your feelings being an indicator of your thinking. And I know a lot of people, especially when I've heard people discuss this topic after learning about it, and a lot of people seem to think that when you speak about thought, you speak about the conscious part, the thing you hear going through your mind. And so they're looking for techniques, application-based learning to how to control those thoughts. But as you just said, you can't really control your thinking. So could you talk a little bit about that? Like what's the difference between the conscious thoughts that you have and you can explain and you can work through and that automatic subconscious system?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. When I talk about thought or when I talk about thinking, I'm really talking about it at maybe a broader definition than a lot of people think. You're right. It's not just the conscious thoughts that are going through our head or our conscious thinking. And before I used to talk about conscious and unconscious. I don't even say that anymore. I mean, it's really, really broad. It's kind of everything. So it includes the stories you've told yourself over the years. It includes your experiences because that only comes to you via thought. Everything in the past that you remember comes to you via thought. So it's a whole broad thing that comes to you. Some of the stuff you're aware of, some of it you're not. Some of it you are aware from time to time, and some of it are just really deep rooted that you're just unconsciously in your psyche that you're never aware of. But the really cool thing is that for me, I don't need to do anything about that. And I find that as I've deepened my understanding of how the human experience is created, that stuff that there might have been some unconscious thought that I had. So actually, I'll give you an example of one. I had really unhelpful thoughts or stories around money. I used to think that, you know, to have more money or to create more money meant I had to be unhappier. I always, for some reason, and if I spoke that out loud, I know that you could poke holes in it, but for whatever reason, that was just true for me. More money meant working harder, less freedom, less happiness, and that was it. And there was only a certain way that I could earn more money, which was through my career. And without ever really consciously talking about that, without ever really getting trained around money, without really exploring that, at some point, those thoughts, which weren't always conscious, they were just there, it was a story in the back of my mind somewhere, they fell away. And at some point, I remember talking to a client about money and realizing that I didn't have that story anymore, and realizing that that had just fallen away because it no longer made sense.
So would you say that, getting an understanding into how this works and how your emotions and your thoughts work and how they're connected has a bit of a domino effect where you might be, but it's going to affect all these other things that you have going on that you might not even know that you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that for me and for my clients and for other people that kind of are colleagues on this journey, that you know you can talk about one thing. So I find it useful when I'm coaching a one-on-one client to talk about what's going on in their life, so we can make it relevant to them. It's always far better to talk about something relevant to someone than generically. It's a lot more impactful. And yet, even though we will talk about something very relevant to them, almost every single time, someone will come back and say, "This changed in my life. Can you believe it? It's incredible." And I'll say, "Yeah, it's incredible, but not unusual." And it will be something that we never even spoke about. You talked about that guy that wrote on Facebook earlier on. Those sort of things are becoming less and less unusual. It's becoming more and more common, where I'll have a conversation with someone about a particular thing, and basically we'll be talking about what we're talking about today, and then at some point they will come back to me and say, "You know what? At work this happened, and it's because of our conversation," and we will never have even discussed work on our call.
That's perfect. And it seems to me that, all this is so deeply connected that you can't really work on one thing. If you're deepening your understanding and what you're talking about, then basically you're by definition you're working on everything that goes on in your life and in your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that as I've deepened my understanding of this, originally I came to this for my career to be a coach to help other people. So that's obviously changed, but so many other areas of my life have changed. Areas that I wasn't even looking to improve, such as my relationship with my family, dramatically transformed for the better since understanding this. And that was kind of not even on the chart. I thought I had a good relationship with my family, and it just took it to another level. Similarly with, like I talked about my relationship with money, that completely changed. It wasn't an area really that I was focused on. And also with my health, it's something that I wouldn't say I'm the kind of fittest guy in the world, but I've noticed that I stopped drinking, for example. Now I don't have a problem with anyone drinking. That do what you want, but for me, it just started making sense of, oh, I don't need to drink anymore, and I find that I have a better time now not drinking than I used to whilst I was drinking. And it's really interesting because when I start working with clients as well, I say, I know you're going to change in what you've come to me for. I also know you're going to change in other areas that we haven't even discussed. And yet I don't know how that's going to look, and neither do you. And that's a really cool thing because everyone seems to have their own thing. Some people dramatically lose weight and change. There was a lady that I knew who used to have chronic migraines, and she didn't come to this understanding to improve that, but she found that changed. And there's so many stories of people having, like the domino effect in another area of their life, quite dramatically. And it's just really cool to see what shows up and what changes. And again, I don't know why that happens in that way. I don't know why a certain area moves before another area, but I do know it's very, very cool.
That sounds great. So definitely seems like something that our viewers should look more into. And like you said, we've had other people on here who have the same kind of philosophy and take on it. And we've had Gary Kramer and Jamie Smart and others. If anyone wants to get a hold of you and find out more about you, what should they do?
Okay, so there are a number of ways. Probably the easiest way is via my website, which is www.ankushjain.co.uk. From there, they can message me. It's got links to my Facebook and my Twitter. It's also got a link to my podcast. So I do. It was weekly, but it's a little less regularly now. But I do a relationship series podcast, which is using this philosophy specifically around relationships, and it's all types of relationships. So parenting, romantic relationships, business relationships. So that's another way that people can get access to me.
Cool, and you've had some great guests on that podcast as well.
I have. I've basically found that a lot of teachers of this understanding were really unknown, and are getting on in their years, shall we say. And so part of me doing that podcast was really finding the top experts from around the world that aren't brought together anywhere else, and interviewing them in really kind of half an hour to 40-minute podcasts, to make really relevant content for people. And we've been getting some really great feedback on it as well. So I'm biased, but I encourage people to listen to that.
And they can find that through ankushjain.co.uk, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Perfect.
And it's also available on iTunes.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for being here. I had a great time, and I had a lot of new thoughts, and I'm sure and hopeful that our viewers did as well. And hopefully we can get you on here again sometime in the future.
It'd be an absolute pleasure. Thanks, TJ.
Thank you.